And so your job, even though it seems like, oh gosh, another batch of laundry or another batch of dishes or just more housework, there's great repercussions that come even from that. And there is no job in this world that doesn't have tedium, that doesn't have things you don't like to do.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Fascinating Womanhood channel, where we talk about all things that have to do with femininity and building strong relationships. I'm Cherry Lynn, and I'm here with my mom, Dixie, Andelin, Forsyth. Hi.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. So we are here today to talk about mothers, more specifically, the value of mothers. We had an Instagram post a while back that received a lot of likes and a lot of discussion about the value of mothers today. And we wanted to open up a discussion about it. We've just had a lot of feedback about mothers that stay at home not being as valuable in society, mothers that stay at home and do they need to work?
This is really important because the truth is mothers are absolutely key because we raise, for the most part, civilizations. It's a huge job and it's a very important and valuable job. What you do today, the way you raise your children, can have effect for generations and not just here and now.
Yes. And I think too, this video is inspired to help women to feel like they can be reminded of their value because it's just being lost. Like you said, it's just being lost in society. Women are feeling this lack of motivation. Even the ones that do decide to stay home, they feel this lack of motivation because they don't feel like their value is there in society.
And because what we do as mothers is very hard and it takes a long time and it requires a lot of patience. It sometimes probably seems like, is this really valuable? Am I really doing something?
Maybe I should go get a job or something. Like people are feeling that way.
Yeah, the truth is what you do, the way you raise your children, and it isn't just, we've been fed a line that it's quality time that's most important with children, not quantity. That isn't true. You need both, actually, because your children depend on you to learn morals, to learn how to treat people, to learn skills, basic tasks like making your bed, all kinds of stuff for things that they learn, as they say, at mother's knee. And it's stuff that happens every day. The questions they ask you when you're cooking or when you're cleaning, and they ask you something that ends up influencing them and they remember it their whole life. Those are the kind of things that we have such influence on in the world. And you can see by the state of the world, that we have a lot of work to do. We're not responsible for everybody's bad behavior, but we play a part.
This is meant for all mothers. It's not just the value of stay-at-home mothers. I think there's also been some misunderstanding about that because Fascinating Womanhood, we support all mothers, and that's who our audience is. A lot of our audience is mothers. So even if you're working, we still want to talk today in this video about the value of you as a mother.
Right.
Where are we getting all this information from today?
From a lot of sources, from my book, Fascinating Womanhood, for the Timeless Woman, my mother's original book, Fascinating Womanhood, my husband, who's been a neuropsychologist for over 40 years, and life experience, of which I'm old, so it's a lot.
Yes, so good. I'm so glad that you mentioned all of those books because that is where the foundation of all of this is coming from. So
yeah, these are just, and I'm sure there's more. These are the ones that I came up with, just that are really important. One of the values that mothers have is that we love our children more than anyone else. There's nobody else, teachers, even aunts and uncles. No one loves your children as much as you, and that's a very key thing because it gives you a lot of influence. Mothers spend a lot of time, and I mentioned that before, a lot of time, particularly when they're little, with their children, with their babies. Mothers teach about life and relationships, how to get along with people, what people are like, how to understand people as best as we know. And we teach them that. We teach them social skills. We teach them manners, how to work, developing a work ethic, being responsible, the value of work, all those kinds of things they learn first from us. We teach our children about God and what that means. However we think about God, we teach them that. What is the meaning of life? Comes from primarily from mother, at least first from mothers. We do our best to protect our children. mothers have a natural desire to protect our children from not only like physical dangers, but also things like bad influences, people that are going to be mean to them, bullies and things like that, traumatic experiences. We protect our children from not being exposed to things too quickly before they're old enough to be able to handle it, because as we all know, this life has some kind of crummy things in it, and we protect our children, and it all begins with mother. I live in the United States, and I love American history, and I've studied recently the lives of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. I've been really fascinated by them, but it's interesting, both of them have said, and of course George Washington is considered the father of the United States, and he risked everything for the freedom of this country, and he made a statement that everything he was, he owed to his mother. Everything he became was, he honored his mother for that. And Abraham Lincoln said something very similar. He says, everything I am or hope to be, I owe to my mother. And just because you may not go down in history books as valuable, George Washington's mother really should get a lot of credit for the United States even existing. And the same thing is true with George Washington's wife, Martha Washington. We talk about her a little bit in my book. She is an unsung hero of the Revolutionary War. And she didn't care whether she was honored with statues and things like that. She loved her husband and she loved her children, and she was behind them. And there were times George Washington was so discouraged and depressed, and she always came and stayed with him in very difficult circumstances where he was camped during the war. And she buoyed up the troops. She organized sewing circles. She helped people be happier, and she helped him to be able to have the courage and to not be so discouraged about what he was doing, because it was very dangerous and there was no sure outcome.
I love what you said. You did several radio shows for Mother's Day, and they were asking you a lot about mothers. And I remember you saying, well, how would every woman feel if they knew that they were raising the next big leader of the United States or any country? How would they feel if they knew that, and how much more empowered, I guess, and motivated would they feel if they knew that their kid was going to be doing really amazing things? And would it change the way you raise them? Would it change the way you think about other people caring for them and so forth? And I really love that. That's really stuck with me.
You never know whether your child, whether it's a child that's adopted, whether it's a niece or nephew that you're helping with or taking care of, whether that child is going to be a great inventor, somebody who does some amazing thing, somebody who invents something. You don't know whether your child is going to be that person. And if they were, and the truth is, whether they do that or not, every person is valuable. And when you raise one, it's a huge, huge responsibility and a great honor.
So now that we've talked about all of the good things that mothers do, now we're going to talk a little bit about what we think the repercussions of good mothering are.
Yes, and this is some of the things that we don't always think about. Children tend to be more responsible as adults when they have good mothers. And that lasts well after you're gone from this world. They have more respect for people. They're better at self-care. They have a better work ethic. They become better citizens, more law-abiding. They are happier as adults, and they tend to have more positive relationships. It doesn't mean that you control everything, but this is an influence that is a tendency, and that can go on for more than your child. It can go on to your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. These things ripple down. Children who grow up with loving and good homes tend to be happier as adults. They tend to have happier families themselves, and then they teach their children the same thing. If, for example, you were to have grown up in a family where there was some abuse of any kind, you have a chance to stop that cycle of abuse with your children and stop it for generations. Sometimes if somebody experiences abuse, it was also backwards in generations. It was their parents were abused and their parents before that. You actually can stop that cycle of abuse. And that will help generations of people. And you leave a legacy with your family that goes on for generations. For example, I can go with my own life. I heard stories growing up of some of my great-great-grandparents that I never knew that died before my parents were born. And I learned from them a work ethic, because I was told stories of how great grandma Isaacson, who was from Denmark, came to the United States, and how they always raised geese and made their own feather pillows and feather beds because they didn't like the straw ones that the early pioneers had, and what a great work ethic they were. And I heard about how kind they always were to all their neighbors and fed people when they came over. So that was one thing. I heard about my grandmother that I have only one memory of, and I was really little when she died, so it kind of doesn't count. But she was my mother's mother, and I heard wonderful stories about her my whole life, like how her attitude about, she would say, let's sail through the dishes, or she made things sound fun, all work sound fun. She says, let's sail through the dishes or dance through the vacuuming. One of the big things I remember really admiring about her is if she had a bad feeling about one of her kids going, say, with their friends to the movie, and she just had a bad feeling about it, she'd say, if you'll stay home with me, you and I will go to the movies together. And the kids always loved going to the movies with her because she was fun. She, instead of just saying, no, you can't, she would do the positive thing. I always heard those things, and stories on the other side too, of my other grandmother. When I hear those things, and that influenced me and my work, I was influenced by my mother and my work ethic. And she'd say things like, when I was having my first child and I was scared to give birth, I thought, all this has to come out, she said, look around you at all these people. If they can do it, you can. She always said that if they can do it, you can. And she wasn't saying I was better than. And I thought, yeah. So those kind of things I try to teach my children. And you can do that too. So you begin to see the incredible influence and power you have as a mother to influence generations. And so your job, even though it seems like, oh gosh, another batch of laundry or another batch of dishes or just more housework, there's great repercussions that come even from that. And there is no job in this world that doesn't have tedium, that doesn't have things you don't like to do. There's no job. Either it's paperwork or something that you have to do in regards to your job that isn't so fun.
Right. Even if you are a working mother, it's the same thing. You're going to go to work and you're going to have tedious tasks.
There always is. Like I have a brother who's a pathologist, and he's a doctor, and he's the doctor's doctor, and he's got all his status. But he also still has to do tons of reports that he doesn't like. He has to sometimes dissect colons, which isn't so fun, and it's dirty and not very nice. And he does things that he likes that are kind of cool, but he does a lot of things that are just that he just has to do. And one of the things that doctors do that people don't always realize, they do tons of paperwork and reports, and they are not fun. So that's the way it always is. So it's all totally worth it. There's no job harder, less accolades. There is no job that can have the repercussions over generations like your job as a mother. None.
Yeah. And I think, keeping in mind too, you don't have a salary. You don't have, and I know you have that in your book. This is something where you're not going to get paid a salary, but the salary is these good repercussions that you just went over.
Yeah. And
do you want to go over the repercussions of dysfunctional mothering now?
Yes. When mothers are dysfunctional or just gone all the time and just not engaged with their children. Children tend more towards victimhood, feeling like victims. And victims, we know, is always a weaker position. If you feel like a victim, you feel helpless and powerless. So we don't like that. If you come from a very dysfunctional home, a lot of times children grow up to not distrust men, or if it's guys, women. If they experience something, you don't want them to grow up and think not to trust any man or not to trust any woman if you're a guy.
I think that also happens a lot in broken homes, unfortunately. If you have a divorce, you tend to go to that route of your father was this and your mother was this, and it turns into that victimhood, and it turns into what you were saying, don't trust men, don't trust women.
That's why so many, I hear young women now, and I really like it, they say they really try not to badmouth their ex to their children because they realize it can really have bad repercussions. There's a tendency to teach girls that femininity is a weakness in a lot of homes. And that's one of our core strengths. That can lead to repercussions down the road too. There's more of a tendency for children to be lazy, to be not taught a good work ethic without an involved mother. If you're just trying to get them to be quiet so you can either do other things or you're gone, you can teach that. Children who aren't engaged, raised by engaged and involved mothers, tend towards more getting into drugs gangs, because gangs give them a feeling of belonging and purpose, which then leads to crime. They have a much greater chance to end up with divorce, unhappy families, and also abuse. Either they abuse people, they're in an abusive relationship, or both, which then that cycle can continue with any children they have. And there's a greater chance to be sexually promiscuous, whether you're male or female. So you can see how those things can go on through generations too. And those things, you may come from a background kind of like that, but you have an opportunity to break that cycle. And that's another power of women. Some of us, Cherry, you're one of them, we like to watch crime shows. Some of you out there too may like to watch crime shows. I think I like to watch how they solve them. Have you noticed that all the time they say, here's this serial killer. And then they say, the detectives always look back into what was their childhood like. Well, so Joe came from a broken home where mom and dad were both drug users, and on and on. And I think if they recognize the home life as being contributing to their life of crime, then why don't we do more to strengthen homes so that doesn't happen in the first place? You can see the power of home when you look at crime shows. Oh yeah, they came from a terrible background. You've watched enough, you see there's a lot of things that are real common. No father in the picture. These are not just crime shows. Bob sees this all the time. This is all the time throughout his whole career. Parents are terrible parents, and none of you are like that. And then you think, oh, I'm not surprised their child has this problem because they grew up in a horrible situation. You think, oh, they didn't have a chance.
I think a lot of this is just connecting the dots. And I think a lot of people out there do connect these dots that you're speaking to, specifically with the example of crime shows. But I think it's connecting them even further. It's not letting it stop at, oh, well, they had a horrible childhood. Of course that these things happen. It's about, well, why and how and what can I do? And that's what I love about Fascinating Womanhood. It's about, okay, well, what can I do? Even if you have those difficult circumstances, like you said, where you're raised in these homes, you have that opportunity, like you said earlier, to change. And I think it's about that.
Oh, obviously, the crime things are just really extreme to kind of bring up across the point. But the point is that you need to recognize as a mother the influence and the power that you have in raising another human being.
Yes.
It's incredible. It's incredible, the power that you have, and power in an influential way. And so when we minimize it and think, oh, this isn't important. And some people actually act like, I've heard politicians act like all children need is to be fed and have a place to sleep. That isn't true. All of us who are mothers know there's so much more to raising a human being than just feeding them and making sure they have sleep and toys.
So before we close, I have a very important question that we have been asked over and over again about this subject. And I think it's a very valid question. What about the influence, legacy? What about the lasting repercussions and influence that teachers can have on you? Because I know that's a big thing that is constantly asked and commented on about this specific subject is, well, I had a teacher growing up that influenced me, even though my mother wasn't around, or I had a nanny, or I had a therapy worker, or an adoption service leader that was very influential to me. Doesn't that take the place of a mother? Can't that take the place of a mother? What do you think about that?
Well, if that's the best that they have, or if it's better than their mother's influence, it certainly can be good. But you can see that a teacher, for example, if I had a great teacher, that teacher, I wouldn't have had them my entire education, maybe 1 year, 2 if you're lucky. And you have many teachers throughout your childhood. And same with any of these other people. Yeah, you might have a very influential person, but they don't really hold a candle to mother's constant influence and presence. It's because we're biologically connected to them. Even if you have a teacher who loves you, which I don't think I ever had one that I felt loved me. Did you?
Yeah, I did. I had a very influential teacher in my life, and someone that did put a big footprint on me, and it was my dance teacher. I do feel that she loved me, and I do feel that she still does, but I think it is I think what you're trying to say here, and I identify with what you're saying because I feel like I have that example of the teacher. It's not the same kind of love. It's not the kind of love where I'm going to call you at 2 a.m. or something. It's not the kind of love where if something tragic happened, that's the first person that I would call. I know that you would be that person that would be there for me no matter what. And I think family, it doesn't hold, a teacher or whoever doesn't hold a torch to blood and family, unless of course, you have a scenario where there's family.
Especially a good
or something. Yeah, a good family is not going to hold a torch to that teacher. And that doesn't mean that the teacher is not influential. That teacher that I'm talking about had a tremendous impact on my life in certain ways, but not necessarily on everything I do every day, like you.
You're right. They are valuable. We're not saying mothers are valuable. No one else is. Many influential people in your life. There's grandparents that have a lot of influence in your life, but if you're a mother, that's an incredibly valuable and powerful position to be in, because you basically raise another person, and that has repercussions long after you're gone. And in Fascinating Womanhood, we talk about Princess Diana. She's been gone over 20 years, but you can see the influence, those of us who remember her, the influence that she had on her 2 boys. I can still see it in them today, and she's been gone over 20 years. The influence that she had on them was enough that it affected them and the way they treat their children.
Well, thank you so much for having this conversation with us today. And thank you everyone for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And don't forget to check the links down below where you can see the places to find us on social media and where you can pick up a copy of Dixie's book, Fascinating Womanhood for the Timeless Woman. Also, don't forget to hit subscribe on our videos if you like what you're seeing, because we're here every week and we would love to see you back next time. We'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.